it's Kiss and Tell Magazine here with Dr. Jenny, and welcome back, Keeley, because we have another wonderful topic that she is an expert in, and we want to talk about today. Hi, Keeley.
Yay! Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be back here, and I am so excited to jump into this topic.
So, we're talking about seduction. I don't think people talk about this that much.
They don't. That's right. And it's one of the things I've been thinking the last couple of days. I'm so excited that we're here to talk about seduction because when I work with couples or I work, sometimes with an individual, I'm always asking, how does the intimacy start between you and your partner? And oftentimes there is such a big bump to get into the act of the physical intimacy space, the sex space. And I think of that as like the time of seduction. Like, how are we seducing our partners? And there's so much that can go wrong in that seduction place. It's not
Right.
always that like the sex is bad or wrong or something's going wrong with the sex. It's actually getting to that part, that seduction piece. So I'm ecstatic we're here talking about this today.
Why don't we start and like move in stages on the seduction and like we'll seduce the podcast here. So how would you like my hair is I'm
I know, I love it. You're like, how do we seduce? You're touching your hair. It's great for all the people watching on YouTube.
so
Where
so
does seduction start?
anyway, how would you define seduction as is? How would you, not really the word as in Wikipedia defines seduction. What I mean is seduction when you're in the act. How would you define doing this?
Yeah. So, it's funny when I start to use the word seduction with people because some people get really uncomfortable with that idea, actually. I think inherent in seduction is this idea of bringing someone along into your world of erotic desire. So, you're slightly, if we think of arousal on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being I'm interested in sex, 4 being like I'm ready for my genitals to be touched, 9 being point of a return, 10 being an orgasm, it's sort of bringing someone up your arousal curve with you. And when we go to seduce someone, we're slightly above in our arousal curve as we invite them in. And I
Okay.
think oftentimes people feel like, oh, if I'm pulling, like some people can feel like, oh, if I'm pulling my partner into my arousal, do they really want to do that? Is it okay to invite someone into my space? Shouldn't I just kind of meet them there and wait and see if they come? But seduction is really saying, like, no, no, come with me, come with me. And I think the mistake that a lot of people end up making is that either they fly up their arousal curve without their partners. Their partners are like a 0 or a 1, and they go like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so they're really high and they're bringing a lot of energy into the experience, and their partner's like I can't catch up, and so the partner turns and goes the other way because it feels like too far to jump, or their partner's moving slower than they're comfortable with. So they come to their partner, they're at the arousal sort of like a 1 or a 2, their partner's at a 0, and they're
Mhm.
hanging out in this 1 or 2, and it's been a couple of minutes or even sometimes like, 5 seconds, but their partner hasn't switched gears yet to start to go up the arousal curve. And that person doing that, inviting in seduction energy, panics and goes, well, they're not going to come with me. So I guess it's not going to happen versus like, oh, okay, I'm going to stay right here with you. And I'm going to give you some time, a couple minutes. Maybe at some point, if I'm not sure, I might ask, have a little bit of a check in, and then start to move up the arousal curve together, actually.
So do you have examples of that?
Like, how do people actually do that? What does that look
like,
like?
well,
Yeah, so I think when we imagine approaching someone, Esther Perel talks about this. She's like, the next sexual experience starts the minute the last sexual experience ends. So everything we're doing in our couple is playing into this act or art of seduction. So your behavior, how you're treating your partner, how you're showing up for them, how you're making space for them, that is actually all a part of the low levels of seduction to create safety.
okay.
Safety is the basis of being able to allow yourself to be seduced. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to allow yourself to soften and move into those states of arousal, especially as the relationship moves forward and gets deeper. We start to look at more long term relationship stuff. So, first off, it starts with just in general, the way that the couple is connecting, the way that you're connecting, the way that you're showing up and being present. And for some people, that's going to be really, really super, super important with seduction. They're going to want to feel heard for maybe even a couple of days, listened to, paid attention to, like someone's really in it with them. That's going to have a
Right.
huge unlocking process of when you actually move into the physical space of that person, they're going to be able to settle and move along with you. Now, I think most people think of seduction starting in those moments where you're actually beginning to move into each other's, like what I think of as like an energetic bubble. So if we think of ourselves as sort of having bubbles around us, the real seduction pieces start as we enter into each other's fields. As we get close enough where it's like if you're standing in line in an airport and someone is like up against you, you're like, man, you're like on me, like, kind of get off. Entering into those spaces is where we start to really engage with that seduction and start to invite our partners to come up. So, what I say to people is like, when we move in to seduce our partner, we do want to be solidly in our arousal that's slightly higher than our partner, but again, not way up, the scale. So
Mhm.
for men, like you're not coming in with a hard on if your, partner's doing the dishes. It's like you're coming in feeling your body connected to your cock, feeling confident, but again, not with this like ready to move forward, go for it right now energy. But
Right.
as you enter in, you start to feel the other person. So there is a lot of slowness. There's a lot of, for some people, so I guess what I will say about this is when we get into the actual art of seduction, different people will need very, very different things. So some people will just want you to kind of circle them, get close, kind of come in, go out where you're not sure. Other people are going to want physical contact, either more gentle touch or more suggestive touch or more playful touch. Some people are really going to want eye contact. Some people are going to really want to hear something, particularly in one direction or the other, whether it's romantic or passionate or dominant. And so it's starting to play around with getting to know your partner and seeing what works for them. And I think sometimes people think like they want this, okay, so I'm going to do this first, this first, this first, this first, or next, I guess, this first, this next, going forward. There is no one necessarily like direct thing that's going to work every time. It's meeting those moments, paying attention to your partner, and then trying on the next thing to bring them up. So if we know our partner really likes slow, gentle, connected touch with eye contact, it'd be moving into their space and maybe placing your hand on their arm and gently starting to like tickle their shoulder up to their hair and maybe playing with their hair a little bit,
Right.
looking them in the eyes, maybe kissing the neck, inviting them in and paying attention along the way.
Would you say even flirting is the type of seduction?
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So even that can be in the beginning stages.
Hmm.
You do
Absolutely.
a little bit of flirting and hinting to, what you're looking forward to.
Flirting, teasing. Yeah, and I think the big piece with flirting too that's so great now is the text messages, right? We can send
Oh,
little flirty text messages throughout the day,
right.
even hours before anything might happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, it
So,
was actually last night. My husband was coming home from the city, and he sends me a message on this. We chat on Signal when we're playing sort of more fantasy role play, and he sends me a message on his way home, and he says, um, "Is your husband home this evening?" Because one of the characters he plays is that he's not my husband, and
yeah,
so there is this seduction that can happen in these spaces where it's like, oh. And I got, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to think, like, I don't know, is my husband home this evening? Like, do I want to play that way? Like,
but
sort of getting to see, like, well, what is in that? So, yeah, again, it depends on how your couple is set up and how you guys play, but it's such a huge and important part of allowing your couple to come into the mood.
but because it's telling you that your husband's there and wants to continue,
Mhm.
and it gives you time to go come out of whatever space you're in.
Right, putting the
And,
kid to
oh,
sleep.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, oh, there's my signal,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then now I decide, do I want to continue with this,
Mhm.
or
Right.
do I say, can we just slow down a little bit?
Right.
you know, some type of response.
And one of the things that I think is so incredibly useful and helpful, and I do this a lot with couples when we start to look at seduction, is to actually really start to have open conversations about what gets you in the mood. Because seduction is this invitation into these deeper erotic spaces. And so
Mm,
I'll often say with couples at some point is like, let's talk about how you're seducing each other. Let's talk about who's seducing who, because oftentimes in heterosexual dynamics, it falls on the man to be seducing the female partner. And so it's like I often will ask, what's happening here? And so often women will say, I don't even know, like their responses will be, I don't have any idea how to seduce him. I wouldn't even know the first step. I wouldn't know what that would look like. Should I just say let's have sex? Which is I really loathe that question. It can be appropriate sometimes,
yeah,
yet many couples will fall into this pattern of that's their safety mechanism of saying to each other, do you want to have sex? Because there is a risk and a vulnerability in putting yourself out there and inviting your partner in
right,
that those subtle ways. And so I think sometimes in long-term couples it can get so vulnerable that people pull back. So what I'll say to couples is like, let's do a little mindful exercise, have them close their eyes and think about a couple of different ways that they would be interested in exploring seduction for
mm,
themselves, like in their bodies. How would they want someone to approach them? What do they think could be sexy? Anything in the world, right? Just
mm,
making up anything in the world. Then we come back, we talk about it, and then I'll actually have the person with the fantasy enact that onto their partner in session. So, say there's a woman and she says, well, I want you to come over while I'm sitting on the couch and sit next to me and caress my cheek and lean over and start to kiss my neck and sort of, explore touching my hair, or she's giving this what she's imagining would work for her in that seduction
right,
space. And I'll say, okay, great. Now you're going to do that to him so you can feel what it's like, because I
mm,
think oftentimes we create these fantasies of seduction, but we've never actually tried it on ourselves. And so we don't realize how vulnerable it is and how scary it can be to
yeah,
cross the room. I'm remembering a client who had this one where she's like, I just want you to cross the room and grab me by my hair and just push me against the wall and kiss me really hard. And I was like, okay, great. And she
right,
didn't know I was going to ask her to do it. And I was like, you're going to do it right now. And she's like, no, I could never do that. And I'm like, well, I want you to feel, even if you don't get it perfect, even if you don't actually like playing that role, I want you to
right,
feel the vulnerability in that seduction, which is so
yeah.
important.
Yeah, because in our mind and when it's actually happening, are always on the same page,
Right,
you know.
right.
Mm,
Mhm. To just give a sense of like, oh, this is really, it's a lot to try to seduce someone. It can be a lot of fun and very powerful to feel like you can,
right,
but it's oftentimes also really vulnerable. You're really putting yourself out there, especially if the couple's been in kind of a tense place for sure. And I think what's really interesting too about starting to say, like, let's talk about seduction. Let's talk about how you get in the mood. Let's talk about what you think you want. Oftentimes in these conversations, people really learn things about their partner, like either that their partner is way more complex or way more simple. Like sometimes someone will, couples will say like, well, you can just come over and just, start to touch my hand a little bit or touch my leg a little bit. And the other partner will be like, wait, that would work? And they're
yeah,
like, yeah, like that's, that would be great. That would feel really awesome if you just kind of took a couple breaths, got connected to your body, came, sat next to me, maybe asked me if I want to put my phone down. That's a big thing these days, is who's on their phone or computer.
yeah.
Um, and just kind of like looked at me and just made space, like I would get into the mood. And so it starts to open up all this territory of like, how do we actually allow space for people to get into the more fun, romantic, sexy, intimate, physical spaces?
And you make a good point that, having the conversation about what seduction is to them,
Right.
is that something they've ever done in the past with a past partner? Have they ever tried it? Do they only know of it because of books and TV
Yes.
and all that? And they've never even tried that on, so to speak.
Mhm.
So, like I said, and you said, start with a conversation. Is that something that you want to add to our, our group chat on,
Mhm.
which is, having fun with seduction, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
Mhm.
Which, what I like about this conversation is reminding everyone, watching that sex is a huge umbrella
Yeah.
and intimacy and pleasure and flirting and seduction and all that. These are all components
Mhm.
of the act. It's not just intercourse, you know.
No, no, there's so much to get to the actual act of intercourse that has to
But
happen
but it,
around peripherally.
but it's not just about the O. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand orgasm is obviously the highlight. It's the cherry on top, no pun intended. But what I mean is, it's okay to look at this topic
Mhm.
as uh, deeper
Mhm.
than society talks about it.
Right, right. The level of importance, and I was alluding that to when we first started the podcast, because I think what's so true with couples is it's not necessarily that the sex is going bad once they're in it. For many couples, like once they're actually in that place of connection and enjoying themselves and feeling their bodies, it's pretty straightforward. Not for everybody, but for a great majority of people, but it's actually getting their heads in the space to wanting to have sex, to wanting to take their clothes off, to wanting to slow down and be in that close place. And so there really is not enough conversation around like what does seduction look like? What does everybody need? What are people wanting? What are they curious about? And how to hold that space. I think the biggest piece with seduction that people have to learn, or I hope they're going to sort of think about for themselves, is when we're holding that space of waiting for our partner to come up. Like, can we stay connected to our bodies, paying attention, connected to our arousal while we wait? And in the art of seduction, I actually believe there is something so sexy about going slow. I think oftentimes people are like, oh, passion, you're just throwing your clothes off. You just come together. It's this magnetic thing. And that's wonderful when that happens. Although in long term couples, it's very unlikely that those things manifest, especially if you live with that person and you've got work stress and maybe financial stress and kid stress and family stress and friend stress and all of the things going on in a day to day. It's very unlikely that two people who live together and brush their teeth in the same bathroom are just suddenly going to like go at the same time. Like
Right.
it just it's not a realistic fantasy that I think a lot of couples sort of have in the back of their mind that it just happens naturally or
Mhm.
these sorts of things. There is work that goes into it, and that seduction that happens, that needs to happen, oftentimes involves holding space and going slow as we wait for our partner to kind of jump on that train with us.
Right. Yeah, a lot of times I'll do a food metaphor, and you correct me if I'm doing it wrong because sometimes I don't do it. But how I'm thinking of it right now is you're either doing fast food or you're preparing the meal.
Right,
So we're in a society, especially these days, fast food.
right.
Order it to go, DoorDash or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
when we take the time to make the meal and go through the steps, usually that meal is usually better than what you're ordering, from a fast food place or something like that. So,
Right. And what I love about the analogies of like fast food versus fine dining or a
mhm,
really good home cooked meal is we start to look at nourishment and time and energy that goes into it. Oftentimes, fast food is just that. It's like, I'm hungry. I need something quick to eat. I'm on the go. I'm just going to do this thing, get some nourishment, and move forward. But what we all know about fast food is they're typically we think of fast food, we think of things like McDonald's or Wendy's. There's not a ton of nourishment for your body coming out of that. But when
Right.
we start to look at a meal that's more deeply prepared, that's intentional, where you went to the store and purchased items and then cut it up, or, made a reservation at a nice restaurant and go and you sit down, there's so much more energy and attention in that. And at the end of the day, there's lots of different types of nourishment that comes in. So
Right.
when we can slow sex down, take a deep breath, start to
Mm-hmm.
think about what we want, talk
Yeah.
about it, plan for it, make arrangements around it.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the erotic space begins to take up more room in your life and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately feel more connected to your partner, because it's this unique thing that only for most people, it's, this unique thing you only do with one person,
Mm-hmm.
that particular romantic partner you've chosen, unless you're poly, which is a whole different wheelhouse. But in general, most people are not. And so it's like, this is this one thing I do with this one person, and we let it take up more space. It strengthens the couple in many ways.
So, well, that can be another topic, probably.
Endless topics.
Yeah, that's the good thing about sex too. There's never a time that we have nothing to talk about.
Right.
So, but using the seduction that we're talking about today is a fun component too, because you don't have to seduce the same way every time either. That
Absolutely not.
that
No.
that, that can change like your clothes change, day to day. It can be a different thing each time, in the seduction, role of the two people and whatnot. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think inherent in sex is this vulnerability where people feel so raw and open. And there can be this tendency to go, well, that worked last time, so I'm just going to do the same thing again. That made her come, that made him interested, that seemed to get him hard. Whatever it is that people are looking for as signs that they're getting it right. And um, there can be this lack of um, sort of creativity because of the fear around the vulnerability that is just inherent in the act of physical intimacy. There's just
Yeah.
no way around it. It is a vulnerable space to be, which is why we do it in safe relationships in private with people we love and we trust.
Mhm.
There is deep, deep pleasure and also this vulnerability that happens. And so I think in many regards that coming forward in that seductive space and letting someone know I want something from you. I want to be in this pleasurable connected space. It can feel really scary to take risks there because you just don't know how it's going to land, and it feels really vulnerable. So I have a lot of compassion for folks who end up in that space where they're just trying the same thing over and over again, because I think it is so scary to take risks. And we want to embrace the vulnerability, make space for it in our bodies, and see if we can move into the creative space where we're not relying on trying to have a preset, fabricated way of always doing the same thing. In the beginning, when I work with clients around trying on different types of seduction, say someone's never seduced their partner, I think it's okay to in your head be like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. Like, okay, when they get home, I'm gonna have my robe on with my lingerie underneath, and I'm gonna meet them at the door, with their favorite cocktail, and I'll have my heels on, or what. It's okay to really figure out ahead of time what you want to try, because there's so much fear oftentimes in those new learning places.
Yeah.
And over time, we want to say, can you trust yourself to take some risks in this seduction? Can you trust that even if your partner says, no, not right now, that you're going to be okay?
Mhm.
And sometimes with couples, I will have them explore that together in session of like, okay, if your biggest fear is you're going to be rejected in this moment as you make a pass at your partner, let's explore that. I'm gonna have your partner make 20 passes at you, or you're gonna make 20 passes at your partner and they're gonna reject you each time. And we're just gonna feel into it. Feel into it. Just be with it. You're gonna survive. It's gonna be okay. Like, let's just
Yeah.
stay with it.
Right.
And so often than not, when people are saying no, it has a lot to do with um, there has not been enough warm energy between the couple. There's been disagreements, fights, just not feeling cozy, comfy. And then one person approaches, the person's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, we are not in a good place. Like, do not touch my body.
Right.
And so there is sort of like that pre-work of like, how are we showing up? And
Mm-hmm.
not just to be close, but so that the relationship is healthy.
Right.
Um, and then when we move into touch, there can also be this feeling sometimes where people approach and it's just like not the right time. Like you're leaving to go to an event in 5 minutes and your partner's rushing around trying to get things done in the house. Like that is also not necessarily for most people going to be a time where you're going to get them to slow down with you. So there is learning cues about when is the right time? How do we know we're in the right time to take that risk to move into seduction? And then that really big piece of like, once you move in, staying and holding with that person. Because I think a lot of times people will move in for the seduction, especially in the beginning as they're learning this. They're like, okay, we've had a couple of really good days. We've been connected. We've been sharing. We had some time. There was nothing happening. My partner, we weren't running out the door or we weren't had anything else we needed to do. And I went and approached my partner. And as I touched their leg, they flinched. And what's so true is that as we learn to seduce and as we bring seduction into our couple, especially if we've been in that space of like, hey, you want to have sex vibe,
Right.
people often do pull back because they're a little bit startled. Some people
Mm-hmm.
will always have a startle response, like they're zero when they're in a zero physical contact or someone getting in their energetic space always sends them a little bit into a freeze
Mm-hmm.
or a reaction of protection. And so it's learning that about your partner that that's not necessarily a no. That's just their initial response to someone entering into their space. And can you stay with them, maybe back off a little bit, but can you stay with them and stay interested long enough that they can relax and start to go up the arousal curve with you?
Right. Yeah, and back to us saying communication. I mean,
Right.
seduction and all this is clear communication.
Yeah.
And in communicating in a diplomatic way, and that is not about judgment, I do more than you, it's not about that.
Mm,
It's about connecting. This is what you two connecting in the moment.
mhm.
So, not
Right.
about, one upping the other one. No, it's about you two becoming one when that's half an hour, 10 minutes, or whatever
Right.
it is. But,
Right.
so,
Yeah, and I often think about it too as like in long-term relationships, our needs are shifting and changing.
mhm,
And when we just meet a new person, there's so much excitement and so much newness that sometimes we bypass things that we actually really like or don't like. Um, I remember when I first started dating my husband, there was so much great stuff around our physical intimacy that I sort of overlooked that he's not a great sensual toucher. Like I really love sensual, slow touch. And he, like, after I think like a year into our relationship, I'm like, we really got to work on this because you're really not great at it. In a very loving way. I'm like, this is a thing I need and I want, and you really struggle with it. And it actually does for me in a long-term relationship around seduction. That sensual touch has a huge component of me being able to move into that going up the arousal curve space. And so we
mhm,
worked on it for, gosh, I'd say like maybe 3 years. We really
mhm,
worked on it. And there was a point I remember why, I think I'm like year two, and I'm like, wow, how does he not know? Like, how is he not getting this yet? Like, how am I still having to come back and teach him? And I would get a little bit frustrated and sometimes express that frustration. And, I share that story because I think sometimes we think, we're not get you know in the so there's like a couple points. It's like sometimes we're getting so much great stuff in the beginning that we don't always see some of the things we're not getting, and eventually, inevitably, if we're curious enough about our eroticism, we're going to see things that we're not getting, and we've got to work through them. And it doesn't necessarily mean one conversation works through it. Sometimes it is a very, very long arc for our partners to learn how to be our partner in a way that feels good for us.
Right.
Now, I will say he has completely mastered on his credit, because if he listens to this, he's going to be like, "Wanna? Hey, I worked really hard on that." He has completely mastered being able to touch me in the way that feels good for me, but it is foreign to him, and he doesn't want that touch in return at all. Like, I love massages. I would have a massage probably. I was in Thailand. I got them every day. It was too much. But I would say like once a week with a good masseuse. He's
Yeah.
never had a massage. I think he had like one and he's just like, I was fine. I don't really care. Like we just have totally different needs of skin and energy and the touch on our bodies. So to learn that skill really, really took a significant period of time for him. And so sometimes I think about this seduction place with people where one person is like, in this couple, the relationship is great. They want a very particular type of seduction, and their part it's completely foreign to their partner.
Right.
And when they met, they were doing something totally different than what they need in a long-term relationship. And so
Mm.
it's this piece of like, how do we keep showing up and talking to our partner and not, it's not about letting them off the hook, but giving them the space and the grace to learn as you continue to say, like, this needs to be keep moving. Like I needed to keep moving ahead. Because I remember there were some times where I was like, well, that was like okay touch, but it wasn't perfect. And I was like, getting frustrated. Like, how many times am I going to have to correct this?
Mm.
And I think it's really, really hard to ride that out on your own. Um, so it's good if people hear this podcast and are like, "Oh yeah, I've been in that place trying to like help my partner learn," and it takes a lot more time, I think, than we all think. So,
Especially because no one teaches us this. We learn, through time and experience, and we learn by, who we've dated and who we've been intimate with, what didn't, and hopefully you're also in that process of reflecting what didn't for yourself. Because a lot of times we're focused on pleasing that partner, which is all well and good, but what do you need too? So,
right, right.
defining that and said, as wonderful as it is, and I'm being sarcastic,
I know. Yeah,
is
it's how like not to get pregnant, sort of a thing,
but
right?
yeah, but
Sort of.
none in the conversation
Yeah,
ever is about any of this of what
yeah,
you guys
pleasure,
have been
right?
talking about.
Yeah.
So, we,
I'm thinking right now about a couple that I worked with where we started to look at the seduction piece, and one person was like, it was actually a lesbian couple, and one of the partners was like, the biggest turn on for me and the thing that I want is kissing, deep kissing, and the other partner was like, not only do I not like kissing, I just don't think we're kissing compatible. Like I think we like to kiss in different ways. And so there is, I think when we start to open up these spaces, I think sometimes there's this fear of starting to talk and communicate about what we each want, because there's this question of, will we find that we're not compatible? And what do we do if we're not? Like, what's the path forward? And that's a really tricky place when one person says the only thing I want is kissing, and the other person says like that just doesn't turn me on. Is like, where do we find the space within that, and how do we explore and open? And I think a lot of couples, as they start to move into these places, may feel that way. Like, okay, I'm thinking that I want this thing, and my partner, when I start to talk to them about it, is not interested in it.
yeah.
And so navigating those places and seeing, I often think of like in everything we say we want, like if it's a straight line, there's angles going out of things that are adjacent to it. It's like a fan, like one of
Mhm.
those fans that open. There's, I want kissing. I really want kissing on the lips. I want this certain type of kissing. But as we fanned it out, she was actually okay with kissing on different parts of her body, her partner licking her fingers, her partner kissing her ear and her neck,
Mm.
there was other versions of kissing that actually sort of met some of those needs. And
Mhm.
interestingly enough, as her partner got more turned on and more aroused, she liked kissing, like on the mouth, actually. She just didn't
Mm.
like it going in, just didn't
Mm.
work for her as a seduction mechanism.
Mm.
So there are ways to work through it. We just
Yeah.
have to get curious about it and not sort of dead set that this means the end of the relationship if I like kissing in to get into it and you don't.
Right. Yeah, it's not narrow. It's just narrow-minded or tunnel vision. This
Yeah,
topic is huge and it goes so many ways. And it's
hmm,
fluid, so it just, learn to ride the wave, so to speak.
right,
So
right,
sometimes it can be a little wave and sometimes a big wave and sometimes it will be flat that day, but it's still enjoyable. But knowing that that is a choice, always out there, and you
right.
don't have to think, oh, okay, we're different on this, so that's it.
Mhm.
No, it's not. Just find where you connect.
Right,
Might
right,
be somewhere else on the line on that same topic as you were saying, as those two found out, but you still can find a way of connecting.
right,
So,
right.
uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so thank you for today. And before we end talking about seduction, um, I wanted the audience to know, don't you have sex classes
I do.
you
Yes.
offer? Uh,
Yeah, so we just launched, I guess it's been a little while now, about 6 months, a new course, an online course, a take at your own pace. It's for individuals and couples, and it's called Keeley Sex Class. And it was born out of, I often have this very long wait list, and I ended up taking on mentees to try to like filter through the wait list, but there's still people piling up. And it, you know, oftentimes I try and send people resources as best I can to what's going on in their relationship if they're deciding to wait on my wait list. And I had this idea like I should just put all of the things in the last 15 years that I've learned that are sort of like this catch all of my beliefs around what helps people have a healthy, creative, free, fun, pleasurable, erotic world. And so that's really what sex class is. It sort of walks you through all of the things that I think are the most important in cultivating that curious, playful, open, pleasurable space. And there's tons of stuff in there. It's about 8.5 hours of content. There's homework assignments. And like I said, it can be taken as a single person just wanting to learn about your sexuality, or it could be taken with a partner in a couple. But there's a lot of self-reflection. It is all based in mindfulness and really learning and growing and expanding, which I think, we talk a lot about these pieces here of like, how do we know this stuff? There is a whole chapter module on communication. The things that people need to be able to navigate these spaces in a healthy, productive, and really fun and sexy way. I've been getting great, really incredible, great feedback from it. So
Nice.
I'm excited for people to check it out.
Thank you. Thank you for that for today and talking about seduction.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Happy to be here.